Hello, welcome to Recovery Demystified, a show where we explore our relationship to substances from a radical, non-religious, and empowering lens. Our sobriety is not a purity contract. It is an invitation to become curious about ourselves and find our own unique paths to growth and healing. If you've been questioning the role of alcohol or drugs in your life and haven't found the resources that you need, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello. Welcome back to Recovery Demystified. My name is Early. I'm so happy to have y'all here today. Today, I'm excited to share an interview with Colleen Clifford. She gets into some really important subjects, and one of the things that she talks about that I'm really grateful for is the connection between our own self-image and how if we start to think a lot less of ourselves, that our addiction can very quickly latch onto that and then spiral downward out of control. And I'm really grateful for her very deep vulnerability during this interview, that we get into some really tough subjects, and she's a major survivor, and yeah, just super grateful for her time and energy. And just a little note that somehow the last few minutes of our conversation did not get recorded, or rather my half got recorded, but hers didn't. So I just chose not to include any of it. So when the episode sort of just abruptly ends, seemingly out of nowhere, I'm sorry about that. But yeah, just part of the recording was lost, and I guess that shit happens. So yeah, as always, if you enjoy this podcast, it would be super helpful for me if you would hit that subscribe button. If you could rate and review the show, that would be immensely helpful. And also there is a Patreon, which I made a free tier for. I think it would be really cool if we had a little community there of like-minded people going through similar struggles where we could all support each other. And then also, if you'd like to support this podcast monetarily, there's options for that on there as well. So super grateful for everyone that has contributed to help make this show continue on. And yeah, I guess without further ado, here is my interview with Colleen. Hello, Colleen. How are you doing today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Will you start by introducing yourself to the audience? Let them know your pronouns and just a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I am a she, her, and I commercially fish for 36 years. So that's been a huge part of who I am. Not only what I do for a living to earn an income, but just I underestimate probably 20, 25 years inside a ship on the ocean. So that's quite a long time cut off from reality on land. Throughout my life, I've been a former binge drinker, now a former binge drinker. And that is kind of how I coped on my time off. So let me backtrack a little. Commercial fishing, I work contractually. So for instance, I leave Friday and I won't be home till July. So within those 2 months or thereabouts, I'm out at sea. And when I come home, I have about a month off of free time. And back in the day, you can imagine free time. I didn't really have any responsibilities. I don't have children. I could do whatever I wanted. And so a lot of partying happened back in those days.
So you're a commercial fisherwoman, and I guess, yeah, we could start to get into your story. I guess, what was it like for you to be a little kid? What were some of your first encounters with substances? When did things get bad? And then ultimately, how did you get to where you're at today? So yeah, just start wherever you'd like.
Okay, so I'm in my 6th decade of life. So when I was a kid, that was back in the 70s. 63 is when I was born, so the 60s and 70s. And so it was a pretty idyllic childhood. I have 4 siblings, and we just played a lot. And my upbringing was pretty good. I mean, we had some dysfunction, which is kind of normal when you have young parents raising 5 kids. I definitely did do a little therapy over my birthplace in the family and not getting needs met. But I've learned to understand the situation, and I healed and moved on. But that wasn't really part of my drinking. My drinking started in high school, but even then, I didn't really drink that much. Whenever I drank, it was kind of like we'd steal alcohol and then we'd go behind the bleachers at the field in high school and everyone would get drunk. The first binging, right?
I'm curious when you're talking about being one of 5 kids and not having your needs met and having to look back on that from an adult perspective. I also was one of 5 kids. I was right in the middle, and we were all born 2 years apart. And my parents, they loved us so much. They were wonderful parents, but I do think there is something about there being that many children and just parents not being able to like adequately necessarily respond to all of their needs. And I'm curious if you would talk more a little bit about your experience as a kid and what you're talking about with that.
Oh yeah, I love that. You got 5 in your family. Hopefully they're all still healthy and happy. Yeah, so in my family, I'm number 4 and out of 5. And my mother started having children at 18 years old, and we are all a year apart. Not even a year. My brother, actually, we're more like 9 months apart. So I think my sister, I mean, we've talked a lot about the third child kind of had it the hardest, really, as far as not getting needs met, because my mom had the 2 boys that were kind of rambunctious and took a lot of energy. And then my sister, and at that point she was exhausted and didn't really pick her up a whole lot trying to deal with her brothers. And then I was born. And I think for me in that period, I was kind of a relief because she was going to stop having children for a while. So I was like a welcomed, like, I can take a breath now. But I did learn within our family dynamics, I was always the quiet one that just kind of observed, because I have some siblings who are the loud ones that demand to be seen. And the way that I would play out getting attention would be to clean the house. So my mom would come home and say, "Oh, the house looks nice. Thank you." Or, I would do acts of like good girl things to get kind of noticed in that regard. So I did develop kind of a sense of that I needed to do those things to feel loved. And it took me a while to learn that's not a healthy way of coping in life, or, asking for your needs to get met, is I have to do this in order to get loved.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. As humans, love is one of our most like important needs. And we do deserve love just for being ourselves. Like, we shouldn't have to work to earn it from other people. And I think it's like really hard work. And you did a great job being able to look back and find that part of yourself in childhood and find the root of that behavior. Would you describe yourself as a people pleaser because of that behavior?
Absolutely. And then I kind of developed some codependent tendencies.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also have definitely struggled with some people pleaser stuff. And yeah, it's like a lot of the maladaptive behaviors we bring into adulthood are rooted in early childhood experiences and the way our brains were formed as we tried to do whatever we needed to do to survive, which is based on the attention of our caregivers because we're so helpless for so long. Was there any addiction in your family growing up?
In my grandfather, not in my parents' behavior. And it's probably because their parents, my father's parents, were alcoholics. They had alcohol use disorder. But back in those days, people didn't really think about it as a problem because, my parents smoked. People were smoking and drinking at work. It was really the culture back in those days. It wasn't until about the 70s that, when the smoking campaigns, there was that big lawsuit, and then all of a sudden they couldn't advertise cigarettes anymore, and things started to shift as far as health and wellness.
So you remember as a kid seeing your parents drink and smoke, and you said your grandfather had an alcohol use disorder. Do you have any memories of seeing him drinking?
Oh, yeah. Every time he came to visit, we lived in different states, and they would come at Christmas, or we would go there at the summer, and he'd always bring a bottle of scotch, which he would let me drink from. And he always drank beer, and watched football. So I'd sit next to him, and when his beer was done, he'd give me a nickel to go get him another one. So I was sitting like a little puppy dog waiting for him to finish his beer so I could go get him another one.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I was probably about, I was in fifth grade. So whatever age that is, I think maybe 10 or something.
Yeah, 10 or 11, I think.
Hmm.
And do you remember what it felt like when you would get to be able to drink the scotch?
Oh, I loved it. I felt grown up. I felt like I was doing something sneaky. I love that he like let me do that with him. I mean, it wasn't like we drank a lot. He would just let me taste it, but that was still kind of a big deal. And I equated it with like adventure, fun, living kind of out of my box of being the good girl.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did your relationship with your grandfather feel different than the one with your parents, like where you didn't have to earn the affection?
Well, I never thought about it that way. I truly loved, well, I love my parents, but I just couldn't wait for my grandparents to come visit. And that could be just being a granddaughter. Grandparent relationships are tend to be different, but definitely, yeah, I had a huge love for him. I am a daddy's girl too, so I also, in a different way, have a different love for my father.
Yeah, and you said your parents smoked. Did they drink or use any other substances?
They drank more when they were younger. You know, remember they started having kids when they were still kids. I have some memories of us as kids lying around on beanbag chairs at our neighbor's house. Everyone had pools. We lived in Southern California, so our friends had a pool, and my parents were, drinking and partying in the pool with the pool lights on, and we're all upstairs in our bathing suits because we had been swimming all day, just laying watching TV, waiting to go home, sleeping, whatever.
So you first started binge drinking when you were in high school. Do you want to talk about, do you remember the first time you ever drank?
I do. The first time I really ever drank, it was the kind of deal where me and my friends took a little bit of alcohol from every liquor bottle, and we all came together and drank it. And I think that was about seventh grade. And I thought it was fun and cool, and I immediately enjoyed it.
Did you catch a buzz the first time, or was more of the enjoyment that risk factor, that bonding?
I caught a buzz.
Yeah.
I'm sure I was drunk. Yeah.
What happened after that?
I don't really remember. I mean, I nothing serious happened. We At that time we used to run around, like we probably walked to school. I just went home, and I don't think my parents noticed. I didn't get in trouble or anything. I didn't do it often, so it was kind of like that was the one time. We used to sometimes smoke pot. My older brother is a pot smoker, and sometimes we'd make little bongs out of toilet paper rolls, and he steal some of his pot and thought we were so cool. Yeah.
What were your high school years like?
Well, fortunately, I was a competitive soccer player, and so I kind of got into the jock lane during high school, and every day was focused on playing soccer. And so we didn't party in high school. I didn't party in high school.
So it was just that like initial experimentation phase. And then did you not drink at all in high school?
Wait a minute. I remember taking a weekend trip with some of my friends, and we all got trashed at Lake Chelan. I don't even know why my parents let us go by ourselves, but I remember getting so drunk I wet the sleeping bag, and we were with some guys we had met, and I don't even remember. I blacked out. I don't know what might have happened, but yeah, I was pretty trashed. Very hungover the next day. I have a picture of me laying on the beach with one of my friends, and I was like, "Oh my God, I was so hungover that day."
Did that change your perspective of alcohol at all? What did you think after you got your first hangover?
I was, it didn't faze me at all. Like being a problem, like maybe I should, pay attention to this. It just was like, oh, I don't think I thought anything of it. I just, after the hangover went away, I just kept living my life.
What was drawing you to it?
I think what was drawing me to it was I'm a pretty quiet person, and socially I wasn't like the joker in the group. I wasn't like I wouldn't call myself funny. I wasn't like trying to draw attention to myself. And so when I was in a group of girls that, some of them might be cheerleaders, and I don't know if you were in high school, but if you remember, if you ever had that experience where you're just trying to fit in with a group of peers. And I think when I drank, I felt more relaxed in my own skin around these other gals, and maybe thought I was funnier, just that I fit in, really.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like that's a really common experience in childhood and those teenage years is, yeah, just like a very, very, very deep desire to fit in. And for some reason, culturally, we're told that that's through drinking alcohol. So that's a very common experience. Do you
Mhm.
identify with any amount of neurodivergence?
I don't think I do.
Yeah, a lot of times people will tie into that, their neurodivergence contributing to the social awkwardness, but it also just is part of the human experience, especially those teenage years, just, yeah, really deeply trying to fit in. So I'm guessing you probably graduated high school.
I did. Thank
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah.
What happened after that?
Well, I took a year off to earn some money to go to college, and I worked downtown with my dad. I was living at home, and my friends were in college, so I started on the weekends going to frat parties with my friends, and a lot of drinking then, like out of control drinking. So what happened is during one of those, I was like a late bloomer in my sexual activities. So about the age of 19, I decided it was time to find out what this was all about. And about my second time dabbling in it, I ended up getting an STI that's irreversible. It's not curable. And I didn't know what it was because I was raised Catholic, the good, typical Catholic good girl, wait till you're married to have sex. Back in my generation, I think it's different now, but so I didn't go to the doctor for the longest time because at the same time I was training for a triathlon. So I thought my irritation and pain was coming from all my biking that I was doing because I was biking miles and miles. I finally went to the doctor and he gave me my diagnosis, and I was shocked. I didn't know what it was. Like, I'd never heard of this. And the way he related to me, it was so filled I was so filled with shame. Like, he gave me this piece of paper like he was disgusted to even come close to me, and said, "Here, call this number." Well, first he said, "This is the worst case I've ever seen in my life." He handed me the paper, "Call this number, they can answer your questions." And I was a bit shocked, crying, humiliated, got dressed. I remember leaving that clinic thinking, hell no, I'm not. I mean, this is back in the 80s, right? There's no internet. You don't Google these things. I had no one to talk to about it. Certainly wasn't going to talk to my mom. We didn't have that kind of relationship. I wasn't going to tell my friends. Didn't have anyone to confide in. So I just crumpled the paper up. I threw it in the garbage can on the way out, and I said, "That's it. My life's over. I'm never getting married, never having children. I'm never going to talk about this with anyone." And from that moment, I buried it in my subconscious, and like my whole essence of being unlovable. And that's when my binge drinking amped up.
Wow, I'm really sorry to hear about that. That seems like such a hard experience to go through, especially at a young age. And it definitely just goes to show that abstinence only education is not serving anyone because you can't learn about what the risks are and how to treat yourself well and how to, participate in safer sex practices or anything like that. And then when you go to the doctor and the doctor is like talking to you in this way that makes you feel like disgusted and humiliated. And honestly, like it sounds like he wasn't even providing an education or like letting you
Mm,
know what to expect or what to experience or how to mitigate symptoms or how to treat
mm.
yourself better. It just sounds like a really scary experience. And yeah, I'm really sorry that you went through that and that it caused such a big shift in your life. So that was just like an immediate change. And what sparked the idea to start drinking after that?
Well, first, Early, thank you so much. I mean, I never talked about this publicly until just recently. Like, I couldn't even say these words out loud for years. And I even have like questioned if I'm going to say them in these conversations. But I decided that it's part of my story, and people need to know that sometimes these things can happen to us, but the stories we create within ourselves can change the trajectory of how we move forward within a diagnosis. It doesn't define who we are as people. It's just, okay, how are you going to live past this?
Yeah, 100%. And it's really brave of you to be able to talk publicly about something like so private and so vulnerable. And I think it's really important because you're not the only one going through that experience. And when people are able to hear about other folks who have gone through the same things that they have and have come out the other end and are doing better in their lives, I think it is just really important. So thank you for bringing up a really difficult topic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So within all that, I thought, I didn't think I could ever give childbirth because I didn't know that, I just thought I could never have a baby, like physically through my birth canal. And if someone would have told me, like if I had had the right support and someone would have said, oh, absolutely, you can have children. You just need to let your doctor know so that when you're ready to deliver, the doctor knows that you have this and they can do a C-section. Oh my God, I could have had a child. Instead, I lived my entire life thinking I'm never going to have a child. A lot of it's the story I told myself though. So that's part of the learning lesson is that I created this story from this guy's reaction. I let him affect me so that I would create the story that I believed to be true, which it wasn't true, but I believed it to be true. And I proceeded to live life in a self-destructive way for probably 25 years. So,
yeah. Also, what an unprofessional doctor.
exactly.
Doctors are here to, in theory, help us heal and educate us. And yeah, I'm just really sorry you went through that experience. And if any of the listeners are out there have a doctor who makes them feel bad, go get yourself a new doctor because it ain't right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and once again, remember this was back in the 80s. So I think, doctors have come a long ways in how their bedside manner and how they treat people as individuals. But
yeah, I sure hope so. So after that, your internal view of yourself was shaken and shifted, and it sounds like you maybe had some hopelessness, and then you turned to alcohol. Will you describe what happened there?
Yeah. So looking back, I didn't know all this was going on at the time, but now that I'm reflecting on life, I can see that I loathed myself. Like I just hated me. I didn't feel lovable. And so the partners I chose were like guys that I'm heterosexual. So the men that I chose aren't the kind of guys that I would have to tell I had this issue, which is terrible. Like I just felt like, I don't know. It's just, I didn't have any self-love. And so when I drank kind of into oblivion. This was mostly in my 20s when I first was diagnosed. And I would do things like I fell off a balcony once. I mean, I should be dead probably about at least 4 or 5 times. I jumped in a river once, the Skycomish River. That's a level like 4 rapids. Just randomly jumped in when I was drunk.
Do you remember doing that?
Oh yeah.
What was going through your head?
It was pretty insane. My sister was engaged and we were having a bachelorette party in the woods camping and we were all drinking. And I remember I went down to the river. I probably had to go to the bathroom. And I remember this is when I was training for the triathlon. So I thought I was this like incredible swimmer. And I remember looking across the river thinking I could swim across. And I jumped in and it's the Skycomish, which is glacial fed, so it's icy cold. The second I jumped in, it knocked the wind out of my lungs. I immediately knew that was a terrible idea, and I was swept downriver. And I thought, oh my God, somehow I knew to get on my back and kick, and eventually kicking in the current I hit the shore. I got out, and I was lucky. I jumped in at a place that wasn't going to carry me downriver completely.
It was basically just like your reasoning skills had been deadened by the alcohol.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's scary. And I don't think we've mentioned it yet, but for clarity, you live in Alaska, right?
I live in Washington State.
Oh, Washington.
But I work in Alaska.
Okay.
That's why you would probably think that. Yeah.
I see. Either way, a very cold place to be in a river.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what
Not
other
when you want to swim in.
Yeah, what other consequences did you go through when you were binge drinking at that age?
Yeah, for me, the other consequence was I fell off a balcony and punctured my kidney and was bleeding internally without knowing it. And once I finally went to the hospital, I was there for a week. And the interesting thing is I still didn't put two and two together that my drinking could kill me. And I just continued. The minute I got out of the hospital, my friend and I went out partying that Friday night, like nothing happened, clueless.
Yeah, what went through your mind? Like, what did you chalk it up to at the time? Just accidents or?
Yeah, I just chalked it up as accidents. I didn't think about it as, I didn't have a consequence that shook me to my core yet. But honestly, I think part of me wanted to die. Looking back, I think I was pushing the boundaries of borders of death because I didn't like who I was.
Yeah, and was that what mainly was fueling your drinking at the time? Was that self-loathing?
I'm pretty sure. I'm like 95% sure, yes.
And you said that you're a binge drinker, so were you also blacking out?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember I blacked out a lot, and I used to think that that was normal and everyone did it until I started to quit drinking, and I was like, wait, everyone's not blacked out every time they drink. So, yeah, will you talk a little bit about your experiences with blackouts?
Yeah. There's also brownouts. Are you aware of those?
Yeah, where it's like your memory is sort of spotty and it comes and goes.
Yeah, and if you're talking to your friend or whoever you were drinking with, they can say something that might help you recall the event the day before. Like give you a little, like, oh, remember you were dancing on the table, and you might say I wasn't dancing on the table, and then you go, oh, wait a minute, oh my God, I was. Yeah. So I had those a lot. The blackouts, I think for me, I had them more when I was in my 20s, binge drinking very heavily. Once I started slowing down in my 30s, I think I had more, the blackouts were more like I would be partying with friends that maybe we get together at 5 and start drinking. And then all of a sudden and then I remember looking at my clock, it's about 7:30. And then all of a sudden it's 2 a.m. And I don't know where the time went.
And did you have any like self-direction at that time, or was it just sort of living to drink?
Well, my self-direction was my job. And then when I was home, I was very involved in my sister's kids, and my family and my friends started having children. So I would watch them. And when I did that, I was responsible. Like I had the capacity to pick and choose when I was going to drink. And when I chose to drink, I would just let loose.
How did you get started as with fishing, and was there any like culture of alcohol of drinking while you're out at sea?
Yeah, so how I got started, I dropped out of college. I finally did go for a couple of years, basically to play soccer, and we partied a lot within the soccer team. And I couldn't get to class, so I dropped out. And my girlfriend, who was at a different college, also dropped out from drinking. And she was commercial fishing. And so she's the one that gave me the place to go to interview. And I started fishing in 1988. And yeah, I've been pretty much doing that for the majority of my life. And on the boat, back in the old days, back in the 80s, we did sometimes drink on the boat. before all the rules and regulations came into place, which kind of happened over the years as accidents would happen, or someone would get drunk and try to kill the captain or something, companies finally decided they needed to put some rules in place, and one of them is no tolerance. So there's no drinking or drugs on the boat now, which is really great.
What was your experience of being a woman on a fishing boat? I'm sure that it's probably a male-dominated field. Did you have to fight for your place to be able to do that?
Yeah. Well, having my friend get me on board was helpful because it always helps to know someone. And so once you're on the boat, you just have to prove your work ethic that you can do the job and without complaining. And so I was able to do that. And I didn't mind being around, I prefer to be around men more than women. So I was not, that was not a problem for me. And then I migrated. So within the boats that I work on, the ships that I work on, there's a factory on board. It's a factory trawler, is what they're called. And so we catch our fish and we also process it and freeze it on board our vessel. And because of that, we have a crew that can range, depending on the ship, from 35 people to 165 people. And I ended up migrating into the galley, which is responsible for cooking and the housekeeping. And so it's I've enjoyed that aspect, working in the galley.
So you would drink mostly when you were back on shore, and it sounds like you had some pretty serious repercussions there in your 20s. At what point did you start to question your drinking?
Yeah. So what happened is in my early 30s, my sister noticed, she had an observation. And one time we were with her kids and we were at the park or something. And she says, she asked me why I don't have children and why I don't want children. And I said, oh, I just don't want them. And she just kind of knew I was lying or not telling her something. And so she actually just kept digging in a gentle way. And I finally felt safe enough to tell her what happened to me when I was 19 and that experience that I've been living with. And so that was the first time I spoke about it and cried and was received with love. And from that point, I started I started my healing process with my experience. So, and within that, my drinking kind of was part of that process of healing, and it just slowed down. I wouldn't say it stopped completely, but it wasn't nearly as bad as in my 20s.
So when you were able to speak your truth and receive empathy from another person, you experienced just an instant sense of a beginning of healing for yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, there's something about, when you have a secret and you're holding it, especially a secret that's tearing you up inside. There's something about releasing it to the universe, to somebody else, that's freeing, liberating, for me anyways. And it was like taking a weight off of my shoulders.
Was there something that she said back to you that helped you with that shame that you'd been experiencing?
I wish I could remember our conversation, but I don't really remember any words of wisdom that, stick with me. But I do remember feeling heard, loved. I was crying. She was hugging me. And yeah, that's about all I remember from that. I wasn't really ready to and then it was kind of like in my healing process, I was willing to open the door to it a little bit, let a crack of light in, and then I shut the door. It's like, okay, that's all I can take right now. Stuff it back in the bag.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes just having a person who's non-judgmental and empathetic towards the experience that we've been through is healing enough on its own. You said that you started drinking less after that. Was that a conscious effort, or was it something that just happened organically?
It happened organically.
Looking back on it, do you have any reflections on that? Can you chalk it up to something?
Yeah, I think well, I was dating a guy who had a heroin problem, and I was unaware of it. And he went to treatment center, and I was looking at my relationship with him because I went as the supporter, and I was looking at my drinking habit, my drinking pattern, and I was really able to deny my binge drinking as a problem for a number of reasons, but the main one is that it's because I didn't drink it every day. I didn't think I had an alcohol use disorder because I wasn't always thinking about drinking. I didn't, wake up drinking. I didn't, and even when I did drink, it's like I didn't always binge drink out of control. There were many times where I could, like, quote unquote control it. And so I just looked at my binge drinking incidences as, oh, I just wasn't paying attention, or oh, I was around. We just got out of hand. I won't do that again. And so that's how I was able to stay stuck in my pattern for years.
Yeah, there's always some way that addicted part of us can justify our behavior, and definitely using comparisons is a very, very common tactic that keeps us stuck because, it can always get worse, but that's never a good reason to not work on our shit. So you started, did you get a message from taking your ex-partner to rehab where, like, was there a light bulb moment there? Did you hear a message that resonated with you?
Well, we broke up. So I realized, and that was really hard for me because I was noticing I had codependent tendencies. So I learned that I was at that time codependent. The idea of being codependent had just come out. Someone wrote that book, Codependent No More, or something like that, I think it's called. I'd have to look it up, but it was very popular when it was first written. And I saw myself in a lot of those behaviors. So that was a good awareness. I started going to the alcohol, not anonymous, but the Al-Anon. And it didn't, there's a lot of things that didn't resonate with me about that. But one thing that I did take from that I carry to this day is they had us write out some affirmations, which I'd never done before. This is probably back in 1991. And the last one was to say my name, Colleen. I love myself unconditionally. And we were supposed to say our affirmations every morning. And I could not say that last affirmation to myself. So that was interesting. I just, realized that I had some work I needed to do for myself.
Yeah, I can imagine that being a light bulb moment, not being able to say the sentence, I love myself unconditionally. And yeah, everyone deserves to be able to love themselves unconditionally. So it makes sense that would be sort of like a hinge point for you at that time. What went on in your life after that? When did you meet your husband?
I met my husband a few years later. Let's say I moved to Arizona in 1999, and we met probably about 2005. And yeah, at that point I healed a bit. Well, actually a lot more than a bit, but so we had a commonality. We had horses. He had horses. I had horses. And we ended up deciding to get married. And life was beautiful for my 40s, I would say. We lived in Sedona area, which is in Arizona, which was very idyllic back in those days for hiking and riding horses and all outdoor activities. But he had a horse tour company, a private horse tour company. So he was taking people on private rides all around the Verde Valley, which was beautiful. And then his mother passed in July, and then his father passed 4 months later to the day in October. And that sent him into a depression, which, I'd never been with a loved one who'd been depressed. So I didn't know any of the signs, and I didn't really have the empathy of what he might be going through. I'd never lost a parent, or things kind of spiraled from that point.
Yeah, it's so hard losing someone close to us and then losing two people in a row. I'm sure it's like extremely difficult for him. I know you said that he struggled with alcohol. Were you still drinking at that time, and did y'all drink together?
Well, when we first met, and when we first met, we were drinking together, and I stopped. I saw myself in a video, and I decided, the thing is when I was taking the video, I thought I was okay, and then I saw the video the next day, and I was like, oh my God, I'm far from okay, and I decided that, that's not the person I wanted to be, and I took a break, so I just quit drinking, just on my own, and like I didn't join AA or anything like that. And then, so when he died, I actually wasn't drinking at the time, probably for about a year and a half after his death. And I was kind of on this like hell bent thing when he died that, I would say alcohol's what killed him. And I do believe that alcohol did help push him over his mental ledge at the time, because of what we know of alcohol and suicide and depression. Obviously it's a terrible combination.
Yeah, so both of his parents died and he was depressed, but you weren't sure how to support him. And he was still drinking. Would you describe him as having like an alcohol use disorder, or had he just started drinking more because of the grief, or what was your perspective there?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know how much he was drinking, because at that time I'd asked him, I was at a point where I couldn't really, for me to have success, I couldn't have alcohol around me in the house. It was too tempting. And so I know he was, and I wasn't asking him to quit drinking. It was my thing, right? But I know sometimes I see alcohol in the garage or something, which, I might have pushed him into hiding his drinking, so I wouldn't see it. And so I don't really know what his drinking level was. And at the time that he died, we had actually moved to Utah because, we thought sometimes when life's not going good, people think if they move there, it's the location. If they just like move somewhere, it'll be better. But you take your problems with you.
The geographical cure. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So we tried that, and that didn't work at all. And I was gone fishing, and when he did die, and when he did die, the police called me because I was on the boat, and it was all done over the phone, and they were doing their investigation. So the police officer told me that he was heavily intoxicated, and that it was probably better I wasn't there when he passed. And of course, everyone always says it's not your fault. So yeah, that's a lot in a few sentences, but it's it's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, I'm really sorry that you went through that, and I'm sure that it was hard for you to be away. And people say it's not your fault, but in my experience, a lot of times with those like really sudden tragic deaths, like it's all we can do is think about like what could I have done differently? And it is really common to make things our fault because the situation it is completely out of our control. And sometimes if we're able to assign blame to ourselves and make it our fault, our brain is just like seeking and grasping for control. What were your experiences during that initial phase of grief after you got that call?
Yeah, it was a moment in life I'll never forget. And I worked 12-hour shifts, so I got off my shift at 8:30. And what I haven't mentioned is that in that morning, I'd asked for a divorce. So we had been having a lot of problems financially and emotionally. And he was depressed, but I didn't really know how to shake him out of it. And this was, almost 6 to 8 months after his parents had passed. And we were going to counseling before I went on my fishing contract. And when I went fishing, he said, well, I'm done with counseling and therapy. And I said, okay, well, your choice. I'm going to continue. So I had still been calling my therapist when I was on the boat because I needed that support. And so when I got off work that night, I read an email. I'd asked for the divorce in the morning, and we'd been talking about it. So it wasn't like I just bombshelled him with it. And I just said, I felt a little like a schmuck because I asked my therapist, is it kind of like cowardly to like tell him on the phone? Should I like do it face to face? I feel like that's something I should be in front of him and say. And I said, but I'm ready. Like I don't want to lie to him. And she gave me the green light to just don't wait. And so I said, okay. And I told him that morning, and then I got off work and he wrote me an email, and I could tell it was disjointed. I could tell he'd been drinking because it was just didn't really make sense except, fuck this, fuck that. And then he basically said, by the time you read this, call the police. I'll be dead. And I had to look at that a couple times. So we had one phone on the boat that I could use to dial out, and I used that and called. His son was living in our guest house. So I called him, and then he dropped the phone, and then he called me back and said, yeah, dad's dead, and hung up. So I just sat in it was in the electrical room of our ship where the phone was. And I just, was shocked. I was screaming. I made some kind of unearthly noise, otherworldly noise came out of my body. And then that's when the phone rang a few minutes later, and it was the police. And he just wanted to verify who I was and try to reassure me that it wasn't my fault. And, we hung up. And then I called my therapist, and I don't even know what time it was. It was late, and she answered, and she helped me through that moment. Just helped me process that and say I just had to put it on the back shelf for now because I was fishing on a boat near Russia. I wasn't going to be able to get home like in 2 hours. It actually took a week to get home. And so that's kind of the thoughts that kept going through my mind when I was, living it, was that it's just put it on the back shelf till I get off the boat. I mean, I still had to work for 2 days till I got off the boat, and the captain didn't want anyone to know. So I had to my coworker knew, my prep cook, because she's a good friend of mine. And obviously I wasn't functioning at all, basically covered for me. And so once I got off the boat, I was able to breathe. And, I had to wait to get a flight out of St. Paul, which is this small little island near Russia, but it took a few days. But I finally got home in time for the service, like the day of, which was kind of amazing.
Wow, that's so intense, especially to be in a place where you don't have control over your own physical location. Like you can't just up and leave when you have an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad you had access to your therapist. And also, I'm not an advocate of emotional suppression, but sometimes we do it for our survival. And I think that was probably something that saved you also at that time, because falling apart completely on a fishing boat out on the sea somewhere near Russia probably wouldn't served you very well.
No.
How was your grieving process after that? And you said that you became like sort of an anti-alcohol vigilante because of it. How was your grieving? How was your recovery? And what was the process of going through all of that?
Yeah, thanks for these questions. I hope what I'm saying can resonate with someone. His sister was a AA, she probably still is, went to the AA community of recovery. And so I went with her for a couple meetings, and I remember I'm not a AA affiliate, like I don't do the AA program, but I did appreciate her taking me with her. And I do remember saying that I firmly believe that alcohol helped kill him, if not did kill him. So through my process, I had a lot to do because he died October 8th, and I was going fishing again January 10th on a boat. So that meant I had to get all our personal affairs, as much as I could, done before I went fishing. And we had horses and 2 dogs and 2 cats, and I had to, rehome some of the horses. I had to move some horses to a place where someone could take care of them while I was gone fishing. I had to unfortunately find someone to take the cats because I couldn't keep the cats. And yeah, so I lost a lot of like my life as it was. I really realized that everything we have is not ours to keep. And even my dogs who, I loved, just I had them for a period and someone else got to enjoy them.
Yeah. That's such a hard thing to have to go through. And it's like you were dealing with like becoming brave enough to ask for a divorce in a situation that wasn't working for you, then like a sudden traumatic death, and then trying to deal with everything, every part of your life, the animals, the home, the services, the family stuff. Like, I just want to acknowledge, like, and send compassion to you for that part, because that is more than anyone should ever have to go through. So yeah, tons of compassion to you for all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like, we just do what we need to do to get through the crisis, so to speak. And I think it's interesting. I look back, I was still on social media back then, and I had planned a trip to Hawaii because I was going to ask for a divorce, and I was planning to go to Hawaii to like do this retreat for myself and learn how to scuba dive. And I felt guilty going, and I was still talking to my therapist, and she said, don't let him stop your plans. Like he exited. That's, I highly suggest you take your trip. So I took my trip, and I'm posting like, oh, I'm healing and blah, blah, blah. But it was just all super superficial stuff. Yeah, it was a lot of, I was really mad at him because he really did leave me a mess. We were having financial problems, and I felt like once I realized his situation, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe when I asked for the divorce, he just couldn't see a way out of his problems. And so I was very angry for a while. And like, God damn it, I don't know. I didn't look to see if your podcast is clean or not, so I apologize if it's
It is not. It is.
Okay.
You can say whatever.
I can say whatever I want. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I was really pissed, but then I fell into my own depression after all the pieces were kind of, wrapped up, so to speak. Put the house on the market, all the animals have been taken care of, and I go back fishing. I go back to work, and life's quote unquote back to normal. And once I got off the boat, that next contract, I just really collapsed, as someone described it to me. And I was like, oh, you're absolutely right. That's what I did. I collapsed and I fell into a depression. And that's when I really learned compassion and empathy for what he might have gone through. Because I never felt like dying by suicide, but I can't imagine having those thoughts. And my heart changed for him at that point.
Can you describe a little bit about your experience with depression? Like, what did it feel like and how did it affect your daily life?
Yeah, so at the time I was working with we call shipyard on the boat because I didn't have a home. It was on the market. And so when you work shipyard, you can sleep on the boat. And so because I was in transition, I worked the shipyard contract. And so I still feed everyone every day. And basically that means getting up at 5 a.m. and going to work. And so it just was really hard to get out of bed. Like I remember sleeping as soon as my shift was over, I'd go back to my cabin and just go straight to bed. And I would sleep until the next day and just go, oh my God, I can't. Just wanted to put the covers over my head and just fall into a hole. But on the boat, I suppose I could have called in sick, but I'm from old school fishing where you just always show up, you never call in sick. And so I felt like I had to go to work. Like I told myself I had to get up and go to work. I couldn't call in sick. And so that's what made me get up at a minute to my shift and put a hat on my head. And I don't even know if I brush my teeth sometimes because it's just me in the galley until maybe a couple hours later, and just show up for work and just get started. And that's kind of, doing that daily I just started noticing that, I wasn't going to bed right after work. I was be able to stay up and maybe read a little or watch some TV. And then I just started noticing it lifting.
Yeah, I was going to ask then how you moved through the depression, and it sounds like showing up for your commitments helped with that. Was there anything else that you did
Mhm.
that helped you break free from it?
No, ironically enough, I stopped going to therapy. I stopped therapy and I just realized this like a couple months ago. And I thought, oh my gosh, I never called my therapist again to let her know how I was doing. And so I did. I mean, I'm segueing away from your question, but I did call her a couple months ago, and it was just a lovely conversation, and so that was neat. But I think so. Yeah. So I wasn't doing therapy. I was just working, and then when I would get off work, I started going on retreats. At that time, I was really big into Deepak Chopra. That was like before we know what we know about Deepak Chopra. But I think his meditation, he was very into mindfulness, which nobody was talking about back in those days. He was, like the guru of meditation, and his co-worker partner, Roger Gabriel, is really great with meditation. So I started those practices. I started going to yoga, hot yoga with my sister when I was home. And that was incredible for me. So a lot of reading and self-care.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially like the mindfulness and yoga connection, because a lot of times, a lot of mental health issues, especially depression, is living in our stories. And our stories are things that our minds are telling us that are keeping us stuck. And mindfulness brings us back to the truth of the present moment. And yoga does that in addition to helping us move the energy throughout our bodies that is sometimes like the stagnation of the traumas. And so I think that both of those are like really like positive therapeutic methods that can be like super helpful for people that are feeling stuck. Did you ever
Absolutely.
did you ever in your grief or your depression ever consider drinking again?
I did. I actually did start drinking again, probably 2 years after he died. Yeah. I had a what the fuck moment and I started smoking and drinking.
What happened there?
I was on one of my trips going at this time. I was moving back to Washington from Arizona because my family of origins up here, and I don't have kids, and so I was relocating all that I had left up here, and I was making a trip in his truck, and it broke down, and I remember by Lake Shasta, and I got lucky because that's such a cool little town. I didn't even know it was there. And I was stuck there for about 5 days. And while I was waiting for the truck to get repaired, I just was in the hotel. I had nothing to do. There's a beautiful little park, a beautiful day. And I just said, I'm just going to go buy a 6-pack and sit on that picnic bench over there and drink and smoke. And that's what I did.
Did you just do it that one time or did it continue after that?
Oh, after that, I told myself a story that I could drink again, that I didn't really have a problem. It's okay. So I started dabbling in drinking.
How long
Until,
before I was going to say how long before it accelerated?
yeah, until I had one of those moments.
Yeah.
That was 5 years ago. May 16th will be 5 years since I last drank.
Yeah, how long before, like in between that 6-pack and the pack of cigarettes and the moment of saying fuck it, like how long between that and it accelerating to the point where you decided to quit again?
Yeah, so let's see, that was probably about 2013. So it was probably 8 years.
And were you able to like moderate during that time or did it go back to
Yes.
the binge drinking?
No, I was able to moderate a very, very controlled, what I thought was controlled. Well, because of my age, I mean, people aren't really drinking like you used to drink. And so when you're in a group, a social setting, people typically only have one or two. And so you don't, my group of people. And so you conform to what everyone's doing. You don't want to be known as the lush. So it's pretty easy to stop for me. So the only time that I would binge drink typically would be when I would be by myself. Yeah, that's usually when I would do it. So I started drinking more by myself. and having, finding that, oh, I'd start drinking 1 or 2 beers. And then before I knew it, I'd have 6. And that's when I was thinking, oh, but once again, if nothing bad happened except a hangover the next day, then I would say, okay, time to dial it back. And I would dial it back.
What happened to lead you to quit again?
So on one of those occasions where I wasn't prepared to drink, I ended up driving home drunk. And that is something that, and that's not the first time I've drove drunk. I have to be honest. I've talked to a few people that, if we're being honest, how many of us have drove drunk? But this was the first time so I left the party not as drunk as I was when I was driving. You know what I mean? Like the alcohol really kicked in, because sometimes it takes a while once you drink it for it to really get in your system. And so when I left the party, I wasn't seeing double. I thought I could drive. And I was intoxicated. I should never have left thinking that I could drive, but my drunk brain wasn't thinking. And so about 3/4 of the way home, I started seeing a double line. And I shut one eye and I said a prayer, get me home. And I swear without killing anyone, and I'll quit. And yeah, the next day I decided that the only way I could guarantee I would never do that again is to just eliminate alcohol again. And since I'd done it once, I thought I could do it again. And fortunately, I've been able to.
Yeah. What was your method of getting sober? Was it doing the yoga and meditation, or like what was keeping you successful?
Yeah, those things are definitely a part of my self-care for sure. But what I needed was a bit more heavy-handed stuff at the beginning. And I already knew AA wasn't my thing. And so I tried Annie Grace, this naked mind methodology. And the way that she works is, actually what I did is next day I woke up, I Googled, am I alcoholic, right? That's the first thing a lot of people do. And I said, okay. And then she had just written a book called This Naked Mind, and it popped up. And so I looked at it and I thought, this looks interesting. And I bought it and I read it. And then I ended up joining her 30-day alcohol-free program. And I tried that 2 times without success. And then I decided I was going to pay for her program because I really was serious this time. And I was like, okay, I'm not having success on my own. So just suck it up and pay. And it's the best money I've ever spent on myself.
What about her program worked for you?
She has a way of her coaches. She also works with coaches that are all trained with her methodology. But when you join, you don't have to join having quit. The questions when you're in your group settings are, you just really start to look at why are you drinking? And you start to learn how to really evaluate those stories we're telling ourselves of why we think we need alcohol to sleep, why we think we need alcohol to be social, why we, all the reasons we think we need to drink. So you set up your goals and you work towards them. And when you have a setback, or it's not considered failure in the sense of you're starting at day one, rather you look at it like, okay, so you had a step back. What can you learn from that? Why do you think you had to step back? I mean, you're just looking at it more at an intellectual level, and then you focus on all the success you had up to that setback. So like in a 30-day period, if you were a daily drinker and you went 21 days without drinking and you had a step back, well, you've had 21 days of success, and that's pretty damn good,
Yeah, I also, in early recovery, about 6 or 7, how long has it been? I don't remember. I think it was 2018, the first time I read her book. And it was like so different than anything else that I've ever read. And it was like, you just set shame aside and you focus on like learning about the alcohol industrial complex and what like the societal norms of being told that like drinking has all these benefits. Yeah. And then you go inside and like question yourself and like, do I really believe this thing? Or like, is this cultural conditioning? And yeah, also a huge shift that I think the both of us had with This Naked Mind was not beating yourself up for going back out and drinking again. Because in my experience, when I would beat myself up for drinking, I would be like, well, fuck it then. And then I would go drink more. But with learning through This Naked Mind, it's like, okay, no, you have an addiction. If you go drink again, that's normal. Just learn something from it. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's just like, it's a brand new way of being able to look at addiction that doesn't come from a place of shame. And I think it's like really, really helpful. Have you been continuously sober since then? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Recovery Demystified. If you like what you heard, share it with a friend or rate and review us so we can reach a larger audience. Recovery Demystified is produced and edited by me, Early Brunner. Stevie Petet made our logo. Our beautiful theme music is by Logan Bragg, and our social media manager is Kaylee Bausch. We are entirely supported by your generous donations as a 501c3 nonprofit. You can find a link to donate in the description. May you be happy and free, dear listener.